Next on Arizona 360, students take a stand for more gun control, and groups in southern Arizona take steps to harden soft targets.
We had a lot of churches calling saying, help us.
I know I feel more comfortable with my kids at school with trained teachers.
The Pac12 seeks change in the midst of an ongoing probe into illegal recruiting allegations.
This is not an isolated thing just on our campus.
And remembering the man whose leadership helped make the U of A what it is today.
Public universities meant the world to him.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. Students in Tucson and across the country walked out of classes this week to mark 1 month since the shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida. For 17 minutes, they stood in solidarity in memory of the 17 lives lost and in support of stricter gun laws from Congress.
I want to support people that have been shot with guns, and guns don't have a place in the world, schools, or anywhere.
We are more on top because it's become more of an occurrence now. It's more often that we see shootings. I think we should be stricter on lockdowns and practice them more.
If kids are the ones being shot, then of course they should have a say in it. They're the ones that are terrified in the lockdown drills. They're the ones who are going to grow up and run the whole world.
The shooting in Parkland is the latest to spark debate over how our country prevents attacks on schools and universities. And it's a tragedy that hits close to home. In 2002, a disgruntled student gunned down 3 instructors at the University of Arizona College of Nursing before killing himself. U of A Police Chief Brian Seastone has been with the department for more than 30 years, and he explained how officers now address similar threats. Take me back to 2002. You were one of the officers who responded that day. Something that we as a society hadn't quite seen very much of. Have we changed a lot since then?
Yes, and the world changes on a daily basis anymore with the things that go on. From that particular day, we learned an awful lot here on campus, and as a result of that, changes were made in a number of areas.
The university is really a hub here in southern Arizona, especially during the fall and spring when we have athletics. A lot has changed over the years, though, getting into those venues, because now we're clear plastic bags. We're really monitoring things. What are your officers doing that's really different?
Well, let me preface that by saying 9/11 changed a lot of things. The way we go through airports, the way we go to large-scale events, etc. And the universities, and I'll use the plural term, universities across the nation, no, we draw large crowds. Universities are what are considered soft targets, as are shopping malls, etc. So we got to take those precautions that are necessary to help eliminate any type of risk or threat. And so as a result of that and changing events around the world, we went to the clear bag policy. That way we limit huge backpacks that at one time were allowed into stadiums. It allows us to see what's in a bag. We still don't do physical pat-downs or anything like that. Game day around here. This year people saw a little bit of a change coming off of Campbell in that the area was now blocked with barriers instead of more just the traditional traffic barricades. Because of the things that have occurred across the world with vehicles now being used as weapons. So we always have to evaluate, look at what's going on and see how it affects us here at the university.
A small group to a large group, it seems there's always the potential for a risk.
Yeah, absolutely, and after 9/11, people thought, oh, it's going to be another large targeted event, and now we're seeing across the country and the world, it's an individual or a couple of individuals that are doing things now.
Has training for your officers changed?
Sure. Even before the College of Nursing shooting, after Columbine, that changed the response for law enforcement to an active shooter. Whereas in the old days, you would wait for the SWAT team, and that just is not the way it's done anymore. So we had already practiced for that so that if it ever happened, and it did here, we could respond quickly and seamlessly. We train with other agencies because we need their support and they need ours. So it's a seamless integration right now. The way people report things have changed. You used to pick up the phone and call the police. You can now send UAPD a text message with a video or a picture instead of calling. So all of these things have come about because of technology and just our changing world.
Where do freedom and responsibility meet? I mean, there are times when we perceive an individual who may not look like he or she is in the right place, or maybe acting different, but you're hesitant to call because you don't want to unfairly judge someone.
Sure. And I've always said around here, deciding what is strange and unusual is really difficult. And we always tell people we'd much rather have someone call and report something and let us go over and find out what it is. People know the campus, they know their buildings, etc. So if something seems out of place, we'd much rather go over and just find out that it's this going on instead of something that could have led to something else down the road.
Much of the dialogue around shootings concerns protecting so-called soft targets, a term most commonly associated with schools and churches because of their vulnerabilities. In southern Arizona, we got in touch with two groups helping others prevent or prepare for the worst at these types of locations. And it led us back to a familiar face whom you may remember as one of several President Trump supporters in Sonoyta that we spoke to after the State of the Union address. He has spearheaded an effort to make churches more safe.
A shooting taking place at the First Baptist Church.
The deadliest mass shooting at a house of worship.
It left at least 26 people dead
in a small Texas town.
When we seen the situation happen, the first thought that came to my mind was, that's us.
It's a sadness, and it's also a, boy, we sure hope that doesn't happen to us.
Get your name on the list there for us. After the Sutherland Springs shooting in Texas, we had a lot of churches calling saying, help us. Everybody got a raffle ticket. There's a lot that churches can do to recognize the problem before it is a problem. You form a team, you train that team of what to look for. Well, let's do exactly what we said we do, and that's pray. So let's all bow and ask the Lord's blessing on our evening tonight.
We're at Desert Sun Community Church in Northwest Tucson. I think on average, our membership here is around 300. We feel unprepared. I think at a church, you're not thinking about what would we do if someone comes to harm someone.
In 18 years, how many times do you think deadly force incidences have occurred at a church? So what's the number, Sam?
1,691.
In 18 years, 1,691. At our first event that we did, 2 different people there told me that they know of people that won't go to church because they're afraid of violence. How can you reduce your risk significantly? Focus on the outside, right? That's where 74% of these deadly force incidences are occurring.
It makes me feel sad, and even to the point of almost being angry. When you're sitting in church, the doors behind you, in many cases, are wide open.
Small country church, and this terrible violent incident occurred. If you're like me, you said, that's us, but I don't want it to be us.
The most concerns I had were amongst our peace officers who attend here.
I pick seats that I can see the door, that are in the back. As a police officer, I never really carried as much off-duty, and it's becoming more and more that I've been carrying off-duty.
The goal of anybody that is there prepared for armed force is that they never have a need to do it. People that perpetrate evil don't just copy the last one. They studied it up over the last 10 years of what they can then try to do at another soft target. We try to bring in all of that and help teach the principles that will then protect them from the next headline.
And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to make the public immediate responders. The bleeding control program and some of the other medical skills that we come in and provide are essential. IC-SAVE, well, it's an acronym that stands for Integrated Community Solutions to Active Violence Events. When events like this happen, and unfortunately they happen more and more commonplace, people are going to get hurt. There may be a delay before we can actually put hands on a patient. We're there for everybody, but our top priority for the next 12 to 18 months is, God willing, all the schools in Pima County. This is unfortunately the new normal for us.
If we can stop the bleeding, they have a chance of living.
Our utmost concern is student and staff safety. As we watch events that happen across our country, we just want to make sure that we are as well prepared as we possibly can be. This is Tanque Verde Elementary School, and we are a campus of about 670 students, kindergarten through 6th grade.
We're going to focus on the immediate response to bleeding. We're going to talk about recognizing what actually constitutes life-threatening bleeding versus what doesn't.
We have partnered with IC Save, and they are actually providing Stop the Bleed training for all of our teachers.
We're going to cover 3 main treatment modalities for stopping the bleed: direct pressure, tourniquets, and wound packing. It's pretty basic. We're going to walk the teachers through some hands-on practice and give them the opportunity to practice on themselves and each other.
When we talk about tourniquets, we're going to walk you through everything at a slow pace. We'll show you the part, show you the steps, let you do it on yourself, do it on each other.
We've taken multiple FEMA courses. We've also partnered with the Pima County Sheriff's Department, and they've provided active shooter training to our entire district staff.
Can I go tighter?
Where we don't ever want to consider anything like that happening, there is power in planning for it.
It makes you more aware and more worried, I would say. Our school is very open. We're all over the place, so I think it makes us feel a little bit better about there's a possibility that here's what we can do, because we all have so many questions. I've taught for 42 years. This is the first time we've had to talk about shootings and talk about training since the first ones. I never thought about that kind of safety. Safety to me was safety in the classroom, not running in the classroom, tying your shoelaces.
It's so important for us to plan for any event, and so we've received a lot of really positive feedback from not only parents but staff. They feel better, that they're more prepared.
So if we're putting this on ourselves, we want to make sure that we're pulling that handle towards our midline.
I know I feel more comfortable with my kids at school with trained teachers.
It's kind of like with the EpiPen. You think you're prepared until something happens and one of your students has a reaction. Hopefully you never have to try it, but you feel a little more comfortable. But I think I'm just afraid that when it happens, everything goes out the window.
We're going to ball it up and get it right over the wound, and we're going to put pressure on it.
Of course, teachers, that's our utmost concern, is how do I protect our students?
They may have injured students for half an hour before first responders can get to them. I think that a lot of times you'll see a light bulb come on once they realize that they can't change that. I hope that we give them the training, I hope that we give them the experience, I hope they get some equipment, and I hope that they never need it.
Mexico elects a new president this year, and for the first time, its citizens living abroad can register to vote without having to return to Mexico. The Migration Policy Institute estimates that applies to up to 350,000 Mexicans living in Arizona. And as Nancy Montoya reports, their votes could decide what's expected to be a very close race.
In the past, if a Mexican citizen living in the U.S. wanted to vote in Mexico, most had to physically cross the border back to their home country. Not anymore. Now a Mexican citizen must simply get to one of 50 Mexican consulate offices by March 31st to register to vote.
Buenos días, señor. ¿Cómo le puedo ayudar?
Ruben Ochoa Lopez has lived in the U.S. for 15 years. He's always wanted to vote in his home country, but he was afraid he wouldn't be able to return to the U.S. if he went to Mexico to vote, even though he's here in the U.S. legally. Now, all Ochoa Lopez has to do is present a birth certificate, proof of his U.S. address, and a photo ID to the Mexican consulate's office in Tucson. The consulate will take care of the rest. Ochoa Lopez will receive a card in the mail that needs to be activated. Then a voting packet will be sent to him from Mexico City.
I've been asked to serve as a foreign observer of Mexican elections.
David Maciel teaches Mexican film at UCLA. He's U.S. born and has been asked by the Mexican government to travel the U.S. to promote this new way for Mexicans living abroad to vote. There is a sense of urgency for Mexico to get its citizens living abroad to vote.
The best analysts of the political scene in Mexico all concur that these coming elections in July 1st of 2018 are going to be some of the most contested elections in the modern history of Mexico.
It is, in fact, the most important electoral cycle in Mexico's history.
Tucson's Mexican consul, Ricardo Pineda, says in addition to the presidential race, a record number of senators must be elected from every Mexican state, and governorships are also up for grab.
It's not only going to be a presidential election, but also elections for 30 governors in Mexico, with the exception of Nayarit and Baja California.
Now, the race between the three leading presidential candidates is so close that Mexican election officials predict the results could be determined by 1 percentage point.
And if, say, the percentage is 1, 2, 3, 4 points, the Mexican vote here could be absolutely decisive.
There are now 9 political parties in Mexico.
What the parties did is they came together, they made alliances and coalitions.
University of Arizona graduate Enrique Davis Maslum heads up a website called loscandidates.com. He specializes in following all aspects of the Mexican elections. He says those 9 political parties are forming strange alliances between the country's far left and far right.
If we were talking about the U.S. and saying the Tea Party comes together with Planned Parenthood and they get together and they're having the same candidate, that's how extreme this election is.
The drugs, the gangs, the cartels, the crisis of smuggling and trafficking.
The Trump presidency has also sparked a new type of nationalism in Mexico. Mexicans want their new president to take a hard stand against Trump's policies towards Mexico. David Maciel says there has been no thawing of the relationship.
No, how can they when it's so personal? You know, when he attacks them directly, when he says that Mexico sends its worst to the U.S., when he cites examples of violence of Mexicans. I mean, every country has violence, but then he singles out Mexicans.
Does it really matter what political party wins in Mexico? Does it matter to the U.S.? Does it matter to Arizona?
Of course. We are intricately linked between the two countries. Our economy, our societies, our culture, our family ties. So, like it or not, we depend on each other on all kinds of levels. Mexico is the #1 consumer of American goods. Mexican investors have enormous economic ties in the United States, so it matters a great deal.
March Madness play tipped off this week, capping off a tumultuous year in college sports. An FBI investigation into illegal recruiting techniques thrust several programs into the spotlight and led to the indictment of 2 coaches from the Pac-12, including former U of A assistant coach Emmanuel Book Richardson. Ricardo Valerdi oversees the sports management program at Eller and also serves as the U of A's faculty athletics representative for the Pac-12. He told us what steps the conference is taking to address any potential wrongdoing. One of the hats you wear here at the U of A is the faculty athletics representative in the Pac-12. Tell me about that.
So every NCAA program around the nation has to have a faculty athletics rep who is a professor on campus who can work with athletics, but not for athletics, work with athletics to help the student athletes be successful on the court, on the field, and on the pool, but also in the classroom.
This year, the spotlight has been on Arizona. It's probably a lot of emotions to manage.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a distraction, I think, because we have a lot of good things happening. For instance, we have the highest GPA amongst student athletes in the history of Arizona athletics. We had that in the fall of 2017. So that's something to celebrate. Unfortunately, people aren't paying attention to that. They're paying attention to what they read in the paper or what they hear on ESPN. So we hope that we can get past those things quickly. You know, there's controversies in multiple campuses. So this is not an isolated thing just on our campus. I think there are some root causes that have to be addressed as well, that have to do with incentives, that have to do with pay, that have to do with the relationship with the NBA, things like one and done. So I think it's a deeper conversation to have, and the story is not over.
Is that conversation taking place?
Yeah, it is. So one of the things that the Pac-12 did is they formed a task force to go and look at the dynamics of why college basketball players and coaches sometimes have the urge or the incentive to do some of these things that they're being alleged to have done. And they put together a very good report that talked about really the socioeconomics of the situation. So they're studying it very deeply. They're trying to understand why the Pac-12 is in this situation, but also at the national level.
A 40-page report lists findings and recommendations for improving the business practices of college sports. Among the most notable, encouraging the NBA to drop its age requirement for draft-eligible players, loosening restrictions on communication with agents, and limiting the financial support of shoe companies. In the report, the Pac-12 did not announce any new information relating to allegations against the U of A.
People want change because they realize this is not a sustainable model.
It's entertainment, it's sports, but there's also money and students involved.
Yeah, so these are student athletes. They have to manage both, and from an eligibility standpoint, they have to be enrolled at the university, taking a certain number of units, and have a certain minimum GPA. Without that, they're not eligible to play. There are a lot of other regulations that they have to comply with. Going to class is an important one. And so the balance always is how much time can you really spend on athletics and how much time can you spend on academics? And we always have to balance those two things.
College athletics has become a business.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's no secret that the highest paid people on campus are in athletics, at least the football coach and the basketball coach. So a lot of people ask why. Well, it's a free market economy, and if you can fill Arizona Stadium with 40,000 people, then you should also warrant that salary. Or if you can fill McHale with 14,000 people, and if you can win as well. So there's always a little tension between that and what I would call sort of the more normal salaries on campus. But you know, there's a lot of benefits to that as well.
According to the American Gaming Association, betting on brackets is about a $10 billion industry.
I would suggest if people want to fill out a bracket, they should do two. One bracket should be just based on emotion, on heart, on what you hope happens. But another way to do it is a more objective bracket that's based more on historical performance and data. So maybe we look at things like ratings percent index, RPI. We look at things like the seeding in the tournament, a number 1 seed versus a 16 seed. Well, we know what the likelihood of the outcome that could be. So maybe we fill out another bracket that is based more on the numbers, on the objectivity. And it might look totally different. And it's fun to always look and see which bracket does better. And my theory is that the objective one would do better because it removes emotion from the process.
Success is always relative to the resources that are available.
The University of Arizona lost one of its innovators this week. Former university president Henry Koffler died at the age of 95. Koffler was the first U of A alumnus to become its president, and it was one of just many feats. Koffler asked former U of A provost George Davis to write his obituary. In his own words, Davis shared with us his late friend's legacy.
It's pretty extraordinary. He arrives in 1939 in New York City with $5 in his pocket, has an aunt in Prescott, Arizona. I think the high school teacher in Prescott said, "Henry, we need to send you to the University of Arizona." He graduates in 3 years. He then goes on and gets his master's and PhD at University of Wisconsin, goes to Purdue, and becomes the youngest full professor ever appointed at Purdue at age 29. Henry told me on a couple of occasions he always felt a sense of urgency, even when he was a young man. He had a sense of how time can escape and that the creative years are really important. He remained creative all of his career. But even when he was a young man, a young student, a graduate student, a department head, he just felt a sense of urgency that accomplishments needed to be made.
But I think the people who plan on being presidents when they're young, I think they ought to go and see a psychiatrist.
But I think he was so well suited to the appointment because he was an extremely strong scientist who had demonstrated capacity for leadership in extraordinary ways in the biological sciences at Purdue. Henry understood and emphasized that you hire talented people across campus and then you need to support them. And part of the support would be classrooms, laboratories, studios, the kind of facilities that really make a difference.
My vision of the future university must include extensive new and refurbished space as a major encouragement to the academic enterprise.
His belief system was threefold. He was adamant about the importance of land-grant public universities. Public universities meant the world to him. He understood that private colleges are also important, but nothing thrilled him more than standing at the podium at commencement and seeing, say, 4,000 students graduate and go out into the world and have impact. Henry felt strongly in this first belief system that democracy is dependent upon access and high-quality public education. And second, as everybody knows, he was a talent scout. He basically had the highest standards in reaching out to hire faculty, deans, department heads, whoever, and then he attempted to basically create a kind of a freedom, although he could be autocratic at times, but he tried to create an environment where they could do their best work. And the third thing, which I love about Henry, and he articulates it, you need to be able to grasp fleeting opportunities. I would say you need to have the courage to do that. But he understood that when he was a young student, you know, presidents would stay in office for decades. He understood that when he came in to be president, the whole culture of university leadership had changed, and you can be a president for just a short time. Again, the urgency.
My general outlook is that it's up to people like me to provide the best possible education, research, and public service at the lowest cost, if at all possible.
It was an honor to sit with him and to basically learn some of the details of his core values and how he functioned. Let me give you an example. He says, one of the challenges in a public university is to apply entrepreneurial thinking to a public function.
But if I were to make a decision today, every student in the university will have to be trained in computers, 25,000 students. How are we going to do that? Do we have the money to do that? Do we have space to do it, equipment to do it, and so on? You can see the formidable problems that are before us.
Using public money. How do you do that? That is, and he was very sensitive to not only the need to do it well, but also to do it in a way that was marked by strong ethics. And his backbone for that, so to speak, lay in peer review and in analytics and in common sense. So many of his internal instincts were related to curiosity and passion for things. He loved people.
I believe in human dignity. All human beings are born before God, have the same rights.
And that's all for this week. If you have any feedback, send us an email, arizona360@azpm.org. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.